Hello everyone, I'm Jeremy Alessi, founder of PixelFest, and welcome back to another PixelCast. This is the 5th episode. We did all of September, and now here we are into October. This is the October 2nd episode of the show, and of course, we're kicking this month off with Castlevania IV, probably my all-time favorite game to celebrate Halloween with. In the beginning of the show, you saw the opening intro to the show, which at the time, back in 1991, 1992, I think I got the game in January of 1992. That opening was so cinematic and so epic at the time. The music and the effects were truly captivating. And of course, games have come a long way since then, but hopefully you could still feel what this game brought to the table. Now, Castlevania IV is a game that is known for many things, probably its music, its great whip mechanics that lets you whip in all 8 directions. It had these awesome hanging and swinging mechanics to go along with it, but probably the most memorable aspects of the game for me, or some of the most memorable aspects, were those Mode 7 scenes. There were 2 in particular that stand out. One, there was a rotating room where you would have to grab onto a hook or pivot point while the room rotated about you, and then you'd have to fall to safety on a platform. At first it looked like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to make it through this, and then all of a sudden, using your quick wits, you'd grab onto this little hook with your whip and you could make it out alive. Now, one of the other scenes, and this was my favorite, it looks like you're inside of a cylinder that's doing a giant barrel roll. Now, this particular level or scene wasn't particularly challenging, but the effects, the Mode 7 effects going on in the background at the time were mind-blowing. There was just nothing else like that, and the special effects, the hardware, Mode 7 scaling and rotation of the Super Nintendo was on full display in this scene. The music, of course, as well, was captivating and riveting, and this game kept you on the edge of your seat. If you haven't played it yet, you can play this on a Nintendo 3DS or the Super Nintendo Classic Entertainment System now. They didn't include it on the Super Nintendo Online package on the Switch, but I believe there is a Castlevania compilation that has all sorts of Castlevania games, including Super Castlevania IV, my personal favorite. Now, of course, as we head into October, there are going to be some other games I'd like to speak to. Demon's Crest is one I think I said on an earlier episode that I'm looking forward to playing. It's one that I haven't actually played through other than maybe the first 5 or 10 minutes of the game, and so I'm looking forward to more with that. But this is not going to be the last time we talk about Super Castlevania IV, because in a future episode, I want to do a Let's Get Techie with it on that rotating background. That's something that I just thought about earlier in the day, and I wanted to sort of do what I used to do and demystify that. So in case you don't know, I think I've mentioned it on the show, I used to write a series of columns, or a series of articles, I should say, called Games Demystified that were on Gama Sutra. Those articles were back in 2008 and 2009, so it's been a while. But what I used to do was take popular games and then break down either mechanics or effects inside the games. Usually back then I was focused on mechanics. So I did the gravity effect of Super Mario Galaxy. I did the portal flinging effect in Portal, where you jump in one portal and get flung out the other side of it. I also did Rolando and Final Fantasy Dissidia, which had this really cool rail grinding mechanic in combat. If you never played that, that was a PSP sort of 3D combat game based on the Final Fantasy universe, and it was really actually a very fun game. You could play with 2 PSPs multiplayer, and anyway, it was a neat article to write, and that game wasn't quite as popular. That and Rolando probably weren't as popular as Mario Galaxy and Portal, but nevertheless they had very interesting mechanics. And so I'd like to, I think, thinking back to those articles as I've been doing this PixelCast, I've been thinking about those a lot because those were some of the first things that I did, I think, that were really popular. So these articles were read by between 50 and 100,000 people. And at the time, I don't think anybody was really doing simple technical, I don't want to say simple. They weren't super simple because they did involve code and all of that. But I think those articles had a way of being approachable while still showing some of the engineering going on in the background. And I'm hoping to sort of bring that back a little bit through these videos. And when we do the Let's Get Techie with It sections, I'm hoping to sort of drop some technical words of wisdom while using, popular games or effects that, people, that resonate with people and they sort of understand. And so, I'm basically, long story short, I want to visit that rolling cylinder section of Super Castlevania IV, and I hope that's something that I can get done, bring a demo, and bring the code to a future Let's Get Techie with it. In other news, let's see. PixelFest 2020 is moving forward. A date has been selected, at least a preliminary date. It's one that I'm very happy about. I'm not going to release the date just yet, but nevertheless, it looks like it's going to be a really good time of year to do it. And our partners are starting to line up, and we have multiple meetings now scheduled out into the future. We've had multiple meetings, and sorry about that. So, like I said, multiple meetings are now scheduled and on the books for PixelFest 2020. Partners are sort of lining up, and we're getting together to collaborate and make this the best PixelFest yet. Now, I want to go ahead and get on with the news. One thing that I want to say is, of course, this being the fifth episode of the show, the first two episodes being somewhere between 30 and 40 minutes long, really closer to 40 minutes. And then the third episode was the longest at almost an hour and 10 minutes long. And then it came back down to about an hour in the fourth week. This week, I think there's not going to be a Let's Get Techie With It section. I basically am going to get into the news, and then I want to get into something that's been on my heart lately. And I think that this episode's probably going to be a little shorter than past episodes, but we'll see. All right, so first up in the news, we have Sean Linden is departing Sony Interactive Entertainment. Now, this departure is, he's been with the company for 30 years, and this isn't the only departure. They also have over, I think, in Japan, Sony Interactive Entertainment Japan Asia chief Atsushi Morita has retired. So we have two Sony executives that are departing the company. And, we're going to have to see, where the company goes. Whenever executives leave, there is a noticeable change in a company's, sort of direction and their culture and everything. I've spoken to some people over the years, and they swear that culture and the direction of the company, it really is led from the top. And so we're going to have to see where this takes Sony as these two, long-time employees leave the company, and where that's going to guide them. Now, I read an article just yesterday, and this wasn't on Gama Sutra. I believe it was in Game Informer magazine. But I read an article about how Mark Cerny is leading up the architecture again for the PlayStation 5, and it's still going to have physical media. And, it looks like it's a departure from some of the, competition. It looks like Microsoft is releasing a no physical media version of the Xbox. And, of course, we see what Google is doing with Stadia, where they're trying to jump right into just cloud gaming. Obviously, no physical media there, not even really necessarily a box. Per se, there's this Founders Edition that has a controller that connects directly to Wi-Fi and sends signals over the internet directly to the server. But it's going to be interesting to see, how this works out, because there's, I guess, a little bit of disagreement as to how powerful and how quickly cloud gaming is going to pick up. It looks like Sony, though, is basically coming down on the side of caution. And, so it's going to be very, very interesting to see with these executives heading out, and also how that's going to affect their strategy going forward. Cuphead has sold 5 million copies in 2 years. I think a lot of people have probably seen this game. It is beautiful. It looks like a classic animated movie. And over the course of 2 years, 5 million copies. This is incredible. I believe this is essentially an indie game as well. So, obviously, congratulations go to Studio MDHR, and this is one that if you haven't checked out, you probably should go ahead and do it. I miss hand-drawn animation in everything, whether it's movies, TV shows, all of that. So it's nice to see a game with this look, and I think it's something that I'm going to have to check out sooner rather than later because I haven't played it yet. Duke Nukem 3D's composer is suing Gearbox CEO Pitchford and Valve. So this is one of two lawsuits that are in the news today. And, this is always sad when you see companies or employees or, people that work together at one point, not being able to get along and solve problems and whatnot. But it looks like the composer of the game here is, has not been compensated for his work. And so he's suing. Joy-Con drift class action lawsuit expands to include Switch Lite issues. So it looks like these issues with the Joy-Con drift have drifted over to the Switch Lite, and now that's being included in a class action lawsuit. Again, this, I always think this is sad when I see lawsuits, but sometimes it can't be helped. Sometimes, I suppose there could be some degree of neglect here. I'm really not sure. This is one that we're gonna have to follow going forward to see, how this lands up, and is this something that Nintendo can address without this lawsuit? Is this a huge problem? I personally haven't experienced this Joy-Con drift issue, so let us know in the comments if you have, and what's going on with that for you. Blog, which are the most commonly used game engines? This is a really interesting blog. The author has broken down, essentially looking at Steam and itch.io, the game engines that have been used to develop most of the games on those platforms. Now, interestingly, on Steam, it looks like most games were actually developed using the Unreal Engine, which was surprising to me because I thought Unity just dominated every single facet of the industry from mobile on up. Unity was the second most on that platform, but Unreal had quite a healthy lead on Unity with regard to Steam. Now, as you read deeper into the article, there are some reasons that's what the author may have found, and so it's still possible that Unity might be the most popular on that platform. Now, in the second piece, there's a second table in this article that shows itch.io, and Unity just dominates that, with tens of thousands of games being developed with Unity, as opposed to, I think, just maybe hundreds that are using the Unreal Engine on that. Now, there are dozens of other game engines also listed. Of course, right now, at least as far as I'm aware, the two heavyweights are Unreal and Unity. Obviously, there's also engines like Godot, and there's so many engines that are out there now. But this is an interesting article, definitely one to check out. Logitech acquires streaming software maker Streamlabs for $89 million. That's a pretty incredible acquisition. And so it looks like Streamlabs has essentially their own OBS app. Now, OBS is open broadcasting software, and this is, I believe, an open source project that if you can go search for this project and you'll find OBS. Now, it looks like Streamlabs has a version of OBS specifically tailored that a lot of Twitch users, Twitch streamers use. It looks like 70% of Twitch streamers use this particular app, and so Logitech has made this acquisition. It's a big one, and be interesting to see where this goes forward. I mean, obviously the streaming industry is sort of segmented into, there's multiple pieces to it. Twitch streaming is one segment, and that's where somebody's playing a game. There's quite a bit of delay, but essentially what you have is almost essentially a radio show and it's pretty fun. I've gotten onto Twitch, you type, you make a comment, and whoever's playing that game, they'll usually respond to you within a minute or so, depending on how many comments are coming in, depending on what the delay is. It's kind of a neat thing. Obviously, it lets us share these experiences in games, and this is one of the reasons that we've seen this rise, more people watching other people play games than actually playing themselves. So something to keep an eye on, and for multiple reasons. Now, in other streaming news, Sony lowers the price of PS Now streaming service and adds marquee titles. So Sony made this investment in Gaikai, a startup founded by Dave Perry, DP, who had created Earthworm Jim and done Aladdin on the Genesis and MDK, a bunch of games back in the day. So that was a startup that I think he was leading the charge on that, and ended up selling that company for about $400 million to Sony a number of years back. So that now provides the backbone for PlayStation Now and all the streaming services that PlayStation has, where you can stream even your own PlayStation to your phone and etc. So this, of course, is more indication that the streaming industry is on its way to build up and build up and build up. I'm very excited about that. I think streaming has a lot of potential, not just to sort of offer these titles in a cloud rendered environment, some big data center. I think there's a lot more that's going to be done with this stuff. And so definitely something to keep an eye on and keep paying attention to. Neat that they lower the price. I wonder if this will get more people involved. Obviously, one of the big barriers to entry, of course, still is bandwidth, as we spoke about last week. And what's your style as a creative leader? Now, this is a series of articles, 3-part series, and this is actually the second part. There was one called The Pitch that was on Monday, and there'll be, assuming there'll be a third part to this coming out very soon. But this is, this looks like a nice piece, a nice 3-part series. Sort of showing what it takes to be a creative leader and to sort of analyze and get the most out of your capability and capacity in this creative business. So, all right. So now I want to talk about something that is a little grim, but it's been on my heart and my mind lately. And this little snippet right here is from a CNN article and this details how life expectancy in the United States has been on a decline, and this is like a really rare thing. But this looks like this is a report on 2016 data, and if I remember, it was 2015 or 16 that we started seeing these headlines that life expectancy had taken a downturn, and this hasn't happened. You can see right here since 1962 and 1963. Now, in the article, they will say that, essentially, this isn't a trend. We see this for a couple of years. It doesn't necessarily mean anything. Although I personally, and this is anecdotally, but in my life, I have noticed a lot of people that are passing away much younger than I would expect. As I was growing up, I saw my grandparents and people of, sort of the generation before the baby boomers, the greatest generation as they're called, living well into their 90s, and somewhere you would expect to live somewhere between 70 and 90. As growing up is sort of how I felt. It seemed to me that people were passing a little bit younger were passing in their 70s, and obviously people that were living longer were living well into their 90s or even on up to 100. And of course we were told growing up that life expectancy is always going up. So I even remember an article, maybe it was 2005, 2006, that detailed how people could expect to potentially live up to 150 years old thanks to advances in genetic drugs. And it actually used examples like Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump and other folks that were around 60 years old at the time, saying these folks are 60, this particular generation. And they could reasonably expect to live a high quality of life potentially on up to 150 years old. Now, since those articles came out, and those are, we're going back now almost 15 years when that was the news. And I believe in particular was a Wired article that I read that detailed that. But since that time, obviously, we saw headlines like this in sort of the 2015 era, about 10 years after those articles that I was reading. And something else that I have been paying attention to, as I say, I read the news on Gamasutra every day, and over the last few years, we have seen a lot of game developer obituaries. And, this is a really serious topic because a lot of game developers are passing away, seemingly to me, in their 40s and 50s. Now, not every obituary that's on Gamasutra reveals the age or cause of death. But as someone who has spent a tremendous amount of time developing games, sitting around computers for hours upon hours a day, this is something that caught my interest because, quite frankly, I'm worried, right? And I don't want to dissuade anybody from developing games, but I think more what I want to do is try to help cultivate a good work-life balance if you are in game development. And of course this comes without, this isn't science, this is anecdotal, right? I went through and I looked at every obituary that's ever been reported on Gamasutra. Now, first of all, these have been increasing obviously in number. Game development is a young industry, and so of course we could expect there to be fewer articles in the past and more as we go forward, as more people partake in the industry. And I think there are a lot of reasons why we're seeing more of these articles now. Unfortunately, a lot of these stories, like I said, we see developers passing away in their 40s and 50s, oftentimes of cancer. If it's reported, I believe cancer is the most likely cause of death. And if it was one type of cancer, I believe it's pancreatic cancer. Now, I'm building a report on this, and this is something I'll be reporting on in sort of an ongoing fashion. But like I said, being a game developer myself and having sat around for an upwards of 20 hours a day for weeks on end, months on end in order to ship a game, I am seeing these articles, these obituaries come out, and I'm quite worried. And it's part of why I went on, essentially like an electromagnetic detox. Of course, I also started eating healthier, making sure I'm exercising all the time, making sure I'm getting the proper amount of rest. And it's something that I'm doing. I feel a lot better. Again, of course, we see articles come out about, science, and you need a certain amount of data points in order for it to be proven and all of that. But at the end of the day, I think there's still value in word of mouth, and there's value in sharing individual experiences and individual journeys. So my individual journey is that I started out as someone who was in good shape before I got into game development, and I wrestled in high school. I played soccer. I was always very active. But when I started developing my first published game, it was about a 2-year period where I developed one game, spent about a year on it, thought that was going to be my first published game, and it ended up really not making the cut. So I had to go into another game, spend about another year working on that. It was maybe a little bit less time than a year, but before it was published, but sort of all total, including follow-on work and so on and so forth, it was a whole another year. And so I went through this period of time where I was sitting at my computer, I was pushing myself as hard as I could on making games, and I wasn't eating very healthy, and I put on probably 40 or 50 pounds during that period of time. And, it's one of those things that now whenever I speak to somebody who's younger, who's in their 20s now, that's getting started with this, what I recommend is never to trade your health for your work. If there was one thing, as I say, if there's one thing, at least career-wise, that I could do, I probably would not do that. I would not trade health for work. I would not focus so intensely on my work that that I would have done that again. So it's been a struggle ever since. Now, I have quite a work ethic with regard to my exercise and with regard to eating healthy and doing what's right for my health. And so there have been several times in my life where I have done that. I have been in good shape. I have gained a tremendous amount of weight as I focused on my work. And then I've said, oh my goodness, what have I done to myself? I need to get back out. I need to eat healthy. I need to lose weight. I need to stay away from computers for a while and, lean back down. And, I've had a six-pack several times in my life. So that's the degree that I will push myself to get back in shape. But I think each time that I do that, each time that I go through that whole fluctuation, that's probably taking time off my life. That's precious time that I don't think I want to lose. And of course, it's only been, I would say, over these past 2 years that we've seen a lot of obituaries on Kama Sutra. And so it's really made me question my decisions and really made me question, how am I going to approach my career going forward in light of this? So, like I said, a couple things that I'm doing are, first of all, getting the proper amount of rest. As a game developer in the early days, I would stay up all night working on games. I would stay up until the sun came up, and sometimes I wouldn't even sleep, or sometimes I would sleep just a couple of hours before I had to get on to the next day and do whatever it was that I had to do. There were times that I was just a full-time game developer. I basically work around the clock. Most recently, even at PixelFest, I spoke about Swapfire and how in order to ship that game for the Nintendo Wii U, I ended up working 20-hour days, and I'm in my late 30s at that point working this. So working all day, maybe getting 3 to 4 hours of sleep, getting back up, doing it again, totally neglecting everything else in my life other than that work. And that's not the only time that I did that. And so, of course, getting the proper amount of rest, that's a big deal. Eating healthy, this is a big deal. You want to eat 1,800 to 2,000 calories a day. It depends on who you are, but that diet, there's plenty of material that you can look up in order to see what a good healthy diet consists of. Obviously, you want to have some fruits and vegetables, and you want your proteins, and you want to reduce the amount of sugar that you're eating and carbs. I'm not a nutritionist, but I do know, what I eat. And, these days I'll typically start my morning off with a banana and some yogurt, maybe some granola in the yogurt, but it's a meal that is hopefully 300 to 400 calories or less. And then I try to eat now salads, especially for lunch. I have tried to reduce the amount of bread that I'm, consuming, the amount of carbs that I'm consuming throughout the day, sugars, especially. I don't drink soda anymore, just water, and have a cup of coffee in the morning. But that has been a really big deal. And now I'm also exercising every single day, and so. For years I would do the sort of every other day routine where maybe at times in my life I was lifting weights, maybe at times I was running. I did some long distance running in my 30s, ran a half marathon, so I did a lot of sort of longer distance training. What I found works for me is shorter, magnitude exercise routines where I'm not, going out and running for hours, but making sure that I'm doing it every day, sort of getting up, making sure that I'm breaking a sweat every single day, maybe taking one day off a week, but, really making sure that the body is worked every day and that it's not just sitting. I believe that the greatest risk of stroke is if you're sitting every day. Like if you're always seated, this is very, very bad for your health. And obviously with game development, it is something where you're sitting down, you're doing a lot of thinking, you are sitting with a computer, and generally speaking, it's pretty passive from the neck down. The fingers are going and the brain is going and the eyes are going, that's for sure. But a lot of the rest of the body is being neglected. And so, getting up, making sure you're moving, getting the blood pumping, I think every single day is very important. So we've talked about, sleep, diet, exercise. Now, the one that I think is, this is probably the most controversial, but for me, doing just a little bit of research, and this is something that I'm continuing to research, but looking into electromagnetic radiation. Now, when you first look into electromagnetic radiation, you'll see that there is ionizing electromagnetic radiation and non-ionizing electromagnetic radiation. I believe the former is the type that is, just readily associated with cancer, and you do not want to be exposed to, I believe, non-ionizing radiation. I might have this backwards, but go look it up for yourself. The one thing I can say, though, is I am not so sure, and I think there is some research to support this, although it's sort of, this is new because, our device spectrum and our wireless communications and all of this is so built up now over the past, decade or so. I mean, I'm trying to think when I first got a wireless router. I mean, it hasn't been that long. It hasn't been much more than 10 years since I've been dealing with wireless communications. And obviously now we have smartphones for the last 10 plus years. And those smartphones are getting more and more powerful. In fact, I was just doing some network testing the past week. And looking at my router, I could see the speeds of the devices. And I could see that my iPhone 7, which is the newest device that we have in my household, is cranking out 300 megabits per second to my router, which is in sort of stark contrast to some of the older devices that may be doing 65 megabits per second, so on and so forth. Now, exactly how the devices are doing that and what that means, for the human body, again, I'm not positive about this, but as a layman, it seems to me that device is cranking out more energy in order to hit these higher data transfer speeds. And I have seen an article that basically spoke to the iPhone 7 at the time, at least, as being emitting much more radiation than previous iPhones, and was sort of bumping up against the legal limit of radiation that a device could have, according to the FCC. So it's just very interesting. And so in cutting electromagnetic radiation, what that's meant for me is, keeping my phone at bay quite often, trying to keep it away from me, not keeping it on my body, not speaking with it up close to my head anymore. For the most part, being powered off unless I need it. Checking it, of course, throughout the day in case somebody needs me, but not having it like on all the time. Now, in addition, maybe this is helping my health, maybe it's not. Obviously, the research is still being done. I have had several conversations, face-to-face conversations with people, though, who have said, yes, in my industry, there are people looking at this. I have one neighbor who works with NATO, said that they have scientists that are looking in to see, well, what effect are these smartphones having? And we've had them for about 10 years. It's not a lot of time. And for the most part, people have just been obsessed with using them to get information, tons and tons of information that we never had access to all the time. We've just information at our fingertips, and I think it has been an infatuation, essentially. Communication, instant information, instant gratification, essentially, all the time through the smartphone. But is there a cost to that? And, in my mind, at this point in time, I think that potentially there is a huge cost to that. And so I'm not using it as much. I think there's a time and a place for it, and it obviously has value, but I'm trying to, put that into the background, spending more time with people that I'm around, and hopefully this will, be good for my health in the long run. The other thing besides the smartphone is that, Wi-Fi is composed of microwaves. And so that's something that I didn't know before I started looking into electromagnetic radiation. I just never paid attention to this, sort of being naive and just assuming, hey, all this stuff has been checked out, thoroughly and so on and so forth. Well, I did start turning my wireless router off at night when I'm going to sleep. I'm not using it, so there's really no point in keeping it on. It's just using power, and it's just broadcasting, essentially microwaves out into the space where I'm living. So, it's sort of like I'm doing sort of the low-hanging fruit type of things, right? Obviously, I work in this industry. I need to be on a computer. I need to be using wireless technologies in order to make a living. And I think that, it's probably okay in moderation, just like anything. But looking at these obituaries, and I actually compiled a spreadsheet with these obituaries of everybody that has been reported, as passing away in the game industry from 2005 on up to now. The first obituary on Gamasutra, if you search for obituary, was in 2005. And I believe there was only one that year. And we start steadily seeing sort of more and more as the years go by. And it might have to do with whoever was reporting, for Gamasutra at the time, how much they were looking into that. But in 2017 and 18 and 19, I think we really have seen a spike in obituaries. And so again, it's something that's really been on my heart and on my mind as a game developer, wanting to also take care of my health and hopefully live a long and very productive life. I'm just trying to think, what else to say on that. This spreadsheet, though, that's the interesting thing. It's something that's going to take me a while to work on. And I'm trying to look at obviously how old these developers were, what they actually did, and what they passed away from. And it I think the interesting thing is that looking at it at a quick glance, sort of a gut check from putting everything in there. I did do the average on the age. Now this includes everybody from people who are just voice actors on to people who were programmers, and essentially anybody that was reported that had the age and the cause of death. But the average age of a game developer, as reported by these obituaries, is 58 at the time of death. So that is, you can see this headline right here. What are we looking at right now? On average, Americans can now expect to live 78.6 years. So that means that these obituaries, the average age in these obituaries is 20 years less than what we're seeing as a national average for the United States. And that's just, it's really sort of gut-wrenching and heartbreaking, I think. I love this industry. I love games. When I'm playing a good game, it's just so beautiful. And of course, people have poured their heart and their soul and their health into that. Now, of course, these obituaries are essentially at this point anecdotal. I think there were about 6 pages of obituaries on Gamasutra, and I'm guessing that I didn't actually count them, but I'm guessing that we're just talking about maybe 100 or so people that have been reported, give or take. So it's not really a statistically, I think, relevant sample size, but this is the data that I have to work with off of Gamasutra, and this is what's been reported. So looking at what's been reported, we're seeing a steep decline from the national average, at least in the United States, as we move to game developers. And as I said, these these were sort of everybody. These were people that were doing music. These were, people who were writing who had just like a little crossover with the game industry. There were a lot of voice actors that were reported. And I can say that just, again, gut check from looking at it though, to me, it looked like the folks that were involved in either doing voice acting or music or other sort of other things in the game industry and the heads of the companies tend to look like they were living longer. And so those were definitely pulling this average up. Now, when you look in that middle group, those folks that are, and a lot of times it seems like it's the folks that are the programmers or, the people that are actually hunched over the keyboards cranking away. It looks like those folks are passing away in their 40s and 50s quite, way too often, as what it seems to me now. Again, it's anecdotal. This isn't, statistically substantial sample size but it's something to consider. And I don't know. Again, and I'm sorry to get onto a topic that I think is almost at odds with the way we normally think about our games and our game industry, right? We think about games, we think about having fun, we think about all these, these brilliant graphics, and they're almost like dreams, right? And we think about all the fun we have with our friends, but there's a very real cost to creating this content, and the folks that are creating this content for the rest of us are they are sacrificing their health to do it. It's really, I think, something to think about. And if you are thinking about becoming a developer, and I'm not trying to scare you off, but very much think about your health as you're getting into this, and don't trade your health for your career here. I think that's probably the one piece of advice that I would give now. And a couple years ago, I wasn't thinking about this, I will tell you. Before I started seeing all these obituaries in there, I was like, no, go, work 20 hours a day, push yourself as hard as you can, make a hit game, anything you can do to work harder and do a better job and, sort of overcome this and sort of at all costs become successful as a game developer. And, there's still certainly, I feel some of that. There's some of the things that I've done in my career I don't think would have happened unless I pushed myself super hard and sacrificed some of my health to do it. I mean, at the end of the day, I guess all of us sacrifice some of our health to achieve certain things in our lives. But the longer I live and the longer I do this, the more I'm looking at this stuff and saying, maybe I don't want to sort of push myself all the way to the brink of, what I can handle with my work. Every single day of my life, and maybe I want to pull back a little bit, figure out how I can, just conserve some health, and what can I do to be healthier. So, this is an incredibly tough topic, and if if this has ruined your day and made you sad, I am sorry, but I'm also. I hope that I could put this on your radar. And if you're somebody that maybe has been working too much on this stuff, sitting around too much, thinking about, maybe your health has been on your mind, but you haven't had that thing to just push you over the edge to start, eating better and being more active and sleeping better and maybe spending more time away from electromagnetic radiation, all these devices. I just picture myself when I'm working on my games surrounded by umpteen computers, multiple smartphones, wireless, do all this stuff. And I just think, wow. So if you have been doing that and you've been looking at these obituaries, and maybe it hasn't been on your mind as much as mine, but maybe it's still, maybe it's sort of still made you second guess what you're doing. Maybe now is a good time to take a look at your lifestyle, and not run away from game development, obviously, but maybe just start paying a little bit more attention to the balance between your work and your health. And we're at 42 minutes here, and this is an issue that I'm going to come back to, and I hope, obviously, in the next PixelCast, I come back with, some happier news, some more let's get techie with it, some more gameplay, some, more of the dream. But this is something, like I said, that's been on my heart and on my mind. And I just wanted to sort of share it openly and honestly, and just get a conversation going about our health and what does it take in this modern world to partake and to be valuable and to contribute, but while not burning up your health. in order to do it. And what's it going to take? Also, I think for us to start looking closer at what all this technology is doing to us, and what effect is this having on our immune system, so on and so forth. So if you're somebody that's you're looking at this, maybe you're doing some game dev, maybe you're in the medical side. Is there something that you can do to look deeper into this? I mean, is this just anecdotal fluke evidence that doesn't mean anything, or are we seeing this downward trend as our as our computers and our technology go up? Are we seeing a flip side to all that, and the perceived benefits of it? So anyway, I'm going to get out of here for the day. Again, my name is Jeremy Alessi, the founder of PixelFest, and I bid you a good evening. And of course, always remember, let's keep growing through our love of games.